Hi everyone. I am sharing the love of this training. It's called TELPAS Structures Through Thinking Maps Using PLDs. Our district has an initiative of pushing thinking maps, and I specifically am tackling TELPAS and PLDs with my teachers and with my staff. Just because sometimes teachers, even though they calibrate and everything else, it's still not enough. It still doesn't make too much sense. And so I use this training to kind of dive into PLDs a little bit more with them. This information is from Region 1. I went to that state assessment conference back in November, and they had amazing information. So I do give the credit to them, and I took it and ran with it, and here I am sharing it with you. So this is a little short video of explaining and going through the PowerPoint so that you guys have an idea of the flow. You guys are more than welcome to make a copy of it and tweak it to your district's initiatives and needs. More than welcome to do so. But here we go. So of course I have the content and language objectives. I do explain to teachers or to staff a brief explanation of what the identification process is like, what the reclassification criteria is for TEA, and I take a moment to look at what our scores were. Here I had an elementary group, so I only looked at K through 3rd. But then I also talk about how we need to move away from the compliance thinking mindset to more of we need to create a structured thinking process for our students to be able to perform better in TELPAS, which ultimately is actually going to help them in their classes for other assignments as it is, because, you know, it's language. And the next piece I talk about, you know, Bix and Calp, how, you know, language is composed of both of those categories. The next slide is where I dive into Bix and Calp a little bit more. I have them go into partners. They use this double bubble map to be able to compare and contrast it. So that way it gives me an idea of how much they know and how much they are aware of between both groups. And then I talk about how one of the places to start to improve our speaking and writing and for students is the academic vocabulary, but it's actually more than just academic vocabulary. It's actually having students being able to reason, to recognize patterns, to use their logic, to be able to categorize the questions that they see on TELPAS that can also be answered within their own content. So as an example of what I'm talking about, I asked them, what did you have for breakfast this morning? So I asked them to find a partner and answer this question. I make it a little fun, cute for them. Once they answer that question, I know, because it's you know, we're used to speaking in a social capacity, and so using our Bix, and so most of the time when we answer this question, we only answer it with one or two words. I had, you know, donut and a coffee. I had biscuits and gravy, or and juice, or something like that. But it's basically brief. And so I asked them to take out their phones, to go to the camera, to go to the video, put it on selfie mode, and to record themselves answering this question. And then I asked them to share their phones with their partner, and their partners review their responses. And I asked those partners to actually grade their partner's answers. Did they use complex sentences, tenses? Were their thoughts abstract? Did they use any academic vocabulary or complex ideas? Or did they actually do more of the outside pieces, using simple and short basic questions, but use basic vocabulary? And so we know what the obvious answer is. And so the point of that is that, you know, if I were the teacher and I asked students, and if that's my expectation, that means that I need to raise my expectation. And so that means that for them to actually respond and to an advanced high level, they would have included these sort of items into their responses, because the way that they had just responded actually puts them at a beginner level. And does that actually really mean that that's what their ability and capability is? It's like, no, it's not. And so that means that as a teacher, I actually have to set my expectations, be clear with them, and share what my expectations are with my students. So if we were to redo this activity and I want a better response, that means that I have to create an instructional structure for their thinking. So I share a bubble map with them, and I might have to model this first, and we can do this as a whole group. And within this, I tell my students, and before you answer this question, I want for you to talk about the size of your foods, the colors, the different ingredients, how it tasted, the temperature. I want for them to talk about the foods and the liquids, maybe how it was packaged and how much it cost. So I want for them to be able to categorize and be able to list a sentence or two for each of those categories to kind of get their thinking going. Now, that first example, when they talked to their partner, that gave them a starting point of what the conversation was going to sound like. But I want, obviously, to take it from there and dive in a whole lot more deeper. So this is the point of staff going through the experience of what usually Flipgrid is like for a student, or what TELPAS, the speaking part, is like. Because not only are these our goals, we also have to consider the affective filter. A lot of the times when we hear our voices for the first time, we freak out. So imagine kids. But the more opportunities that we give our students to practice responding, the lesser of a big deal that is, and the more comfortable they will be for TELPAS. Because ultimately we want for TELPAS scores to truly show what the linguistic ability is of a child. So we're hoping to make all of these connections for our staff to understand that a little bit better. So in this next piece, hanging hashtags, I have, this is where we dive into PLDs. And so this gives the introduction to PLDs, and I asked teachers on a sticky note to explain to me what's one thing that they understand about PLDs and what's one thing that they would like to clarify. The main piece about PLDs is what they don't understand is that they're always stuck between two levels and they don't know which way to go. And so with the next few slides, I asked them, we have these examples, these writing samples that Region 1 shared with us, and of course the answers. And so we actually dive in PLDs a little bit more than what the calibration practices go through. But this gives teachers a little bit more of a better understanding of what it all is about. And so I like the fact that in these next slides, everything is highlighted. We remind them that misspellings don't count against a student. And so it actually goes into more specific and more clarity of why this writing sample is this level. So I really liked that. I also share with teachers to answer their question about picking between two proficiency levels. I remind them that whenever they are rating, to always ask themselves, there's a reason why they have multiple writing samples. And so the question that they need to ask themselves is, what level does a child perform at the most consistently? That's what I go with. And so we go through all of them, and I share with them some tips and tricks of how to move students from beginner to intermediates. Again, all this is information, resources from Region 1. I included some of the videos so that way they have something to go back to. There is a video in this cooperative strip paragraph. So if you guys need a better understanding of what that is about, feel free to look up that link. But ultimately, I did include what that process is like, and I included with them in the training the student calendar. That student calendar is basically, that calendar is there's 5 questions that they need to practice every single week before actual TELPAS happens. And 2 questions are listening, 3 questions are speaking. So yes, I literally went through every single test in TELPAS to be able to pick out specific questions. That way, when you present it to your administrators, it seems like, oh, that's actually more doable. Practicing 5 questions each week. We can do that during advisory period, during win time, during, everybody calls it something different, but it's helpful. This practice video is a video of myself. I go through the TELPAS practice pieces with students, and I show them the different features. I explain to them how they can use that notepad to help them answer their TELPAS, the speaking questions. And that way they can set it right beside it before they actually press record. And I help give them some of those reminders that are that sometimes we forget to give them. And then I include a student-friendly rubric that teachers can print out. And I remind them that there's always those 2 opportunities to respond, but once they delete the first one, they can't go back to it, so they do have to stick to their second one if they decide to do that. So just some helpful tips and tricks with all of this. I hope this helps you guys. If and anything else, you can contact me. I'm at Chapel Hill. This is our social media platform. Add us and follow us. And if anything else, I am available, and I wish everyone the best.